Hi. An unfortunate number of women go through discomfort during or around their menstruation. These can range from mild to debilitating cramps, going all the way to conditions of menstrual dysfunction like PCOS, endometriosis, fibroids, etc. These days, fortunately, there has been increased conversation around this issue, so it is no longer taboo. In Iyengar Yoga, we have an extremely benevolent, beneficial, healing, supporting, proven practice for the days of menstruation. In fact, in Iyengar Yoga, we have an extremely healing, supportive, and proven practice for women's menstrual health at different stages of her life, all the way from a young age to during pregnancy, postpartum, perimenopause, and postmenopause. Even though all of these positions are simple, they are definitely not complex asanas in terms of physical ability. They are also supported positions. Still, it is not a beginner's practice. Over the years, we have been trying to make this practice available to our beginner level students, and lately we have been trying to make this practice available even to those who are not asana practitioners at all. After a few trials, the sequence of asanas with the supports and with the instructions that we have arrived at, which we have found to be quite efficacious for even those who are non-asana practitioners. This is the sequence that we are going to share with you today. However, before that, this session is going to be an introduction and going through some basic principles of the practice. And okay, so before looking at the principles on which the practice is based, let me just quickly take up a few very simple questions that came up when we were trying this practice with people who were absolute beginners. Can this practice be done during the days of menstruation? Yes, definitely. This is a menstrual practice. Does that mean that it cannot be done on other days? No, it can be done on any other day where you want to do a supported quiet practice, either because you are feeling physically fatigued, exhausted, weak, or you are feeling mentally fatigued, exhausted, stressed. Does this mean that it cannot be done by men? No, it doesn't mean that at all. This practice is in fact good for men's reproductive health as well. It's very good for men's prostate health. So definitely men can do it as well. Can we call this practice therapy yoga or therapeutic yoga? The short answer to this is definitely yes. It's a deeply healing, supporting, therapeutic practice. Do we have to use the supports or the props that are shown? Do we have to use them even if we are able to do them without the support? Yes. If you are doing this practice during the days of menstruation for help with your menstrual condition, then yes, the supports are necessary. At other times of the month, if you are just learning these asanas, then most definitely you can do away with all of the supports, or you can experiment. But if you are doing it for the days of menstruation, if you have had no experience in asana practice, please do start with the supported practice. This is a supported practice even for mature asana practitioners. Can we continue with this practice even if the practice itself causes pain? So if there is too much stretch or there is too much discomfort, to the point of pain, should we still continue? Pain is a very nuanced topic, and the experience of pain is quite subjective. So I will answer it this way. If you are a beginner and you haven't had much experience of asana practice, if this is going to create a lot of physical or mental discomfort or anxiety, then please don't continue. However, also understand that learning anything, doing anything for the first time or doing anything for the first few times will most probably be uncomfortable just because it is unfamiliar. So I would recommend do this practice, try it a couple of times when you're not in your periods. Try it at any other time of the month when your tolerance level is a little higher. Okay, now let us look at a few principles on which this practice is based. The female reproductive system, the bulk of the female reproductive system, the uterus, the fallopian tubes, the ovaries are all nestled in the pelvic area. The pelvic area is below the abdominal area. So, upper abdominal area, lower abdominal area, and then the pelvic area. Now, please take a look at this picture and you will see the three structures that are nestled in that lower pelvic area. Going from the back to the front, these are the rectum, the uterus, and the urinary bladder. The rectum, which is the last part of the digestive system, the uterus, which is part of the female reproductive system, and the urinary bladder, which is the last part of the urinary system, where urine is held before it is expelled from the body. Now, watch how these three structures are right up against each other. They are stacked right behind each other. It's like they are standing in line. And now look at your own body. Our pelvis is sometimes referred to as a pelvic basin, and there's a good reason for it. The skeleton of the pelvis does in fact resemble a wash basin or a shallow bowl, and it is possible to tilt that bowl towards the front, and it is possible to tilt it towards the back. When the pelvic basin is tilted towards the front, the back lifts up, and this is called an anterior pelvic tilt. When it is tilted towards the back, the front lifts up, and it's called a posterior pelvic tilt. Women can have a natural pelvic tilt. They can have either an anterior pelvic tilt, which might look something like this. So, you see the curve of the lumbar back, the curve of the lower and middle back is quite pronounced, or they might have a posterior pelvic tilt, which looks like this. So, in this case, the lower middle back looks kind of flattened, and you might see slightly bulging front thighs or slightly collapsed back thighs. This could just be structural, maybe one was just born with it. It could be postural, maybe it has happened over years and decades of sitting a certain way, standing a certain way, wearing certain kinds of shoes. So, leaving that aside, if you just look at it objectively, mechanically, if one has either of these conditions of an anterior pelvic tilt or a posterior pelvic tilt, just try to visualize what would happen to those three structures that are stacked inside, how they would get a little deviated. Now, this deviation, would it always result in menstrual discomfort or dysfunction? I don't think anybody can predict, but it does put the organs in a little more vulnerable state. Yes, the body is extremely resilient, most time it adapts, and if you are lucky, nothing might happen to you as a result of it, but there is a chance that this might contribute to menstrual discomfort. So, one of the principles that we are going to follow in this practice that we are going to look at is to try to ensure that we hold our pelvic basin absolutely balanced, where it is neither spilling from the front nor spilling from the back. So, at the front, that pubic area, and the back, the tailbone, the lowest end of the spine, we try and maintain them more or less parallel with each other. In our asana classes, we have various methodologies, many other asanas in which we experiment with this, and we try to make further inroads into this principle. But for now, if you are working by yourself, I think the first thing that you can check is whether the pelvis is tilting to the front or if it is tilting to the back. That might be a good observation to make right away. The second principle, a lot of therapeutic application of asanas, especially when we are talking about therapeutic efficacy that has to penetrate all the way to the level of the organs. It comes from positioning the organ in the correct place and then creating space around the organ. I am repeating that once again. A lot of therapy work that we do through asanas, the efficacy of it is from placing the body part where it is meant to be placed and then creating space around it. This practice is also based on that principle. Now, what are the organs that we are talking about? The reproductive organs, once again, they are all nestled right here at in the pelvic area. So, as we spoke about in the previous first principle, the first attempt would be to place them in the correct place, which is to ensure that that pelvic basin stays balanced, not tipping to the front, not tipping to the back. And the second principle will be to create space in that area. How do we create space in the pelvic area? Very simply, by widening it. It's by space, I am not talking about any mysterious esoteric space, I just mean physical space. So, just spreading the legs out creates space here. Now, many of us, unless you have been doing certain kinds of exercises which require you to spread your legs, many of us as adults, we don't really spread the legs that much. So, there are in fact conventional forms of exercising like walking, running, jogging, where your legs go back and forth. There is a lot of movement, but there is no movement this way, and in fact that can compromise with the ability to spread the legs wide. So, this is a position, this is an action that might be compromised already in some people, and therefore you might have to work a little hard to get it back, to regain it. It is definitely worth the effort. Even outside of this practice, try and see if you have test first of all, if you do still have the ability, and if you don't, gradually work towards regaining it. We are capable of spreading our legs quite wide out. Let's just try this together. So, you can stand, and the easiest way to do it is to just do it while standing. Step out, feet are about hip width apart, step wider, and then step wider, and take your longest stance. And then see if this is relatively comfortable, or are you feeling already some uncomfortable stretch, pull along the inner leg, or are your feet feeling as if the outer edges of the feet are lifting up, or are you feeling too much pressure around the knee, or too much pressure around the hip, or some crampy sensation around the hip. If all of that is happening, then definitely this is something worth looking into. So, we are going to do this in today's practice. We are going to do this in a seated position, which will, in a seated position and a lying down position, which will in fact make it a little more complicated. But that is the principle. We do this to create space in the lower pelvis. Now, coming to the second part of this second principle. So, we spread the leg. Now, we also are going to turn the leg out. After spreading the leg, we are going to turn the leg out. If already this was uncomfortable, this might increase the discomfort. It's definitely a movement that is allowed by the structure of our joints, our muscles, our bones. But once again, if we have not been doing these actions, we have not been taking these positions, it is possible that they might be unfamiliar and a little uncomfortable. When we go into the practice, we are going to look at adaptations to make it a little easier. But once again, let's just try it. So, just stand and have a little footstool or something about 8 to 10 inches high next to you, and maybe you can even take a chair next to you. So, I have these two things. Take the right leg and turn it out, and then lift it up on a height and see how that feels. If it feels really uncomfortable on your inner thigh, inner groin, if it feels like your hip is already about to cramp, then bend the leg and notice if it eases it. So, that is one of the strategies that we are going to use when we look at the asanas. And then bring the leg down. Now, let us try it on a little higher height. So, I have a stool here which is approximately the height of a regular chair. You can use a regular chair, and obviously when we go higher, this is going to get a little more difficult, but let us give it a try. So, see if you can lift your leg up and also turn your leg out. on a height which is about 14 to 15 inches off the floor. Once again check, is it feeling very uncomfortable along your lifted leg inner thigh? Is it feeling like your hip is going to go into a cramp? Is it feeling like your knee is twisting, or is it feeling like you are going that way? So, if any one of these things are happening, then bend the leg and then see, does it make it a little bit easier. So, right now my thigh is kind of parallel with the floor. We are not going to go into more of a bend than this. So, I am not taking anything higher, we are not doing this. We will only keep to this, and if required we will go even lower, we will come to something like this. Let us experiment with this on the left side, and you might realize that the two sides might sometimes feel different. So, let us start with a lower height. We turn the left leg out and when we lift it up. First we lift it up with the leg straight. So, the heel is on that low stool, and check how does it feel. Is it relatively comfortable? Inner thigh, inner groin, is that feeling okay? Your hip, is it pinching? Are you able to stand straight, or are you able to, or are you already feeling like you have to lean to your right side? If any of that is happening, definitely bend your leg, place the foot on the stool and see how this feels. Even if none of that is happening, please do this and see how this feels. So, now what have we done? We have taken the leg out and we have turned the leg out. Let us try the same thing on a little higher height. So, again first with the leg straight, check, and of course, if you are feeling imbalanced, then go near a wall and do it. So, you can hold on to something. See how that feels, and if it feels really unpleasant, try bending it and then see how that feels. Does that make it a little bearable, a little more tolerable? So, these are two options for you that we will explore when we are in the asana. Bring the leg down. The third principle that we are going to look at is that of bringing the front of the head, the forehead area, to rest quietly. And for this I am going to use these same things. I have also just got one folded blanket with me just for softness. You could also just take a cushion. So, again experiment. If it is not possible to sit on the floor, then we will look at that as well, but let us say you can sit on the floor. And let us say you have this chair in front of you. So, this is the experiment. We will go forward and we will see if we can rest our forehead on our forearms like so, again without a lot of discomfort. Now, there is really no thing as average, but this is just a sort of mid position that I am starting with. From here it is possible to go higher and it is possible to go lower, but the body configuration that we are going to try and maintain is that the body goes forward, including the sides of the neck and the sides of the skull. So, everything is going forward and quietly coming to rest. You should not have to struggle and dig down with the head in order to bring it to rest. If you are here and if you are stuck here, then we increase the height. So, I am adding this blanket and check if this makes things easier. This is quite obvious, quite intuitive, that if your head is not coming to rest on a surface, you will raise the height of the surface. What might not be so intuitive, but might in fact be more effective, is to increase the height of the seat. So, I am now sitting a little higher. I have raised the height of the seat by a couple of inches, and then I go forward and it feels a lot easier. So, there is absolutely no struggle involved in going forward and resting the forehead. Yes. let's try this experiment as well. So, just keep a few height supports in front of you. This is approximately the height of a regular chair, and folded blanket which is about 2 inches. You can take a cushion or you can keep a couple of cushions with you. Let's start. Let's just see. I have right now just taken a cross-legged seated position. Again, this position itself might not be very possible by some people, and we will look right now, we will look at some options for that, but let's just start with this. So, let's say you can sit on the floor, sit, let yourself go forward, rest the forehead on the forearms if it comes easily. If it is too difficult, then increase the height, increase the head height, increase the seat height, increase the head height, and arrive at a combination which makes it easy. So, this is what I am doing. I am going to increase my seat a lot more. So, I am increasing the seat by about 6 to 8 inches now, and it is just easier in this position to keep my legs straight. So, I am going to keep the legs straight and then go forward. So, notice once again that the angle of the back, the neck and the side of the skull, they are going at a diagonal in a straight line. I am not having to dig down with the head. So, there is a infinite number of combinations that are possible with any combination of things that you have around your home: cushions, pillows, couch, bed, blankets. Try it out and see, can you bring yourself to rest with the forehead supported in a place where you can stay like that for at least a few minutes. Resting the forehead, resting the frontal head brings our immediate thoughts of what just happened, what is just going to happen, this constant chatter that goes on inside the brain. It brings it, well, not to a complete stop, but it definitely does slow it down. This position is also extremely effective if you have a headache, as can sometimes happen during the periods. So, what happens if you are not able to sit on the floor? You can sit on a chair. I am sitting on a stool, and you can lean forward, let us say on a table, or in this case I am leaning forward on the backrest of the chair. So, this is also very much possible. So, that was the third principle of being able to go forward and rest the forehead, what we call in asana category, the category of forward extension with the head rested quietly. Let us look at the last principle now. This is the principle of a quiet, even breath, and we can try this together. So, this is definitely not pranayama. In fact, it is not any special kind of breathing at all, and it is something that should be available to all of us naturally. But once again, because of our lifestyles, because of our postures, because maybe of the clothing that we wear, maybe the activities that we do, this is something that some people might have lost. In the practice that we do, you will hear me give this cue about keeping the breath soft, even, quiet, softening the abdomen again and again. So, let us once again experiment with this. What does it mean to have a soft abdomen? What does it mean to have a quiet breath? Let us start by lying down. I am lying down on the floor. You can lie down on a firm bed, not on a soft bed. If you are lying down on a higher surface, just use a firm bed. Most definitely you can take a thin pillow, do not take a very high pillow. We are going to need a couple of additional objects for this experiment. This blanket is one of the objects that I am going to use. So, it is something that is soft, which weighs about couple of kilos, about 4-5 pounds, and I am using a book. So, this is a smallish book and it is quite light actually, maybe it just weighs about a couple of pounds. The weights are not exact, you can choose any book, a little heavier might in fact be better. And then lie down. So, keep your objects close to you and lie down. Keep the legs bent. Keep the head in the center. If the eyes are quietly closing, then please close the eyes. And you don't have to look at the screen right now. I will tell you when you need to look. And then just bring your own hands to rest on your abdomen loosely. Arms are relaxed, shoulder is relaxed, elbow is relaxed, elbow is resting on the floor, and just the hands are on the abdomen. That is somewhere around the navel, maybe little below the navel, maybe little above the navel. So, somewhere on your abdomen. And just breathe normally. And then observe if through your palms can you feel the abdomen moving with the breath. With the inhalation breath, do you feel the abdomen slightly inflating, and with the exhalation breath, do you feel the abdomen slightly deflating? Now, we have to be here for at least 1 or 2 minutes for the breath to come back to an even keel. So, this is like our baseline position. Lying down with the legs bent is a more comfortable position for the back, and in this position for most of us the back should be more or less flat on the floor. When we straighten the legs, the lower back once again goes into its natural curve, which is totally fine. But right now, since we have bent the leg, the back should be more or less flat on the floor. Yes. Now, take one of your objects. Let's start with the lighter one. So, I am going to start with the book. And place it on your abdomen. And you can place your hands on top of the book if you want, or you can just leave the arms by the sides. But just put that little bit of weight on the abdomen. This is my lighter object, which is just a couple of pounds. Now, notice how does your abdomen react to that weight. As we breathe, with the inhalation, the abdomen will still inflate, lift up, and with the exhalation, it will slightly deflate, descend down. But now, because of that little bit of weight on the abdomen, see if the inflation is little bit moderated and the exhalation, the deflation is little bit exaggerated. More importantly, watch if your abdomen is receiving that weight passively, or is it trying to oppose that weight, is it trying to lift the weight up. Does the weight feel like a bit of plastic toy that is bobbing up and down on the surface of a lake? Does it feel really light? or does it feel like something a little heavier, that though still floating is not just jumping up and down, it is settled on that water. Don't rush into this. If there is any anxiety, any mental disturbance, you can just remove the weight, place it down and just continue to breathe normally. It is possible that you might in fact like that sensation of having the weight. If that felt totally okay, then I am going to go in for something a little bit heavier. This is about couple of kgs, at most maybe 3 to 4 pounds, not heavier than that, and this is also bigger. So, it goes all across my abdomen from one corner to the other. And then see how does your abdomen react to this weight. With the exhalation, the abdomen descends. Naturally also it would have descended, but because of the extra weight, it maybe descends a little bit lower. With the inhalation, the abdomen slightly inflates, but because of the extra weight, maybe there is a little resistance to that inflation. Take a few breaths in this position. I am repeating this again. If at any point there is any mental anxiety or distress, any kind of discomfort, please just remove the weight and just stay there. Take a few breaths quietly. In any case now, all of us, let us quietly remove that weight without making too many movements. Leave it by the side and then you can bring your hands to the side or you can leave it somewhere on your body. And then notice what is the quality of the breath. I think most of you will probably notice that the breath feels quieter. As a result of the breath feeling quieter, the mind feels quieter. And then roll over to the right and sit up. So, if you liked this little experiment, especially that last little experiment with the breath, you are welcome to try it again at different times of the day. You can do it for about 5 to 10 minutes. It is, and see how that feels. It should leave you feeling a little more quiet in the mind, in the brain, and little more relaxed. These principles together will be used in the practice that we are going to do in the next session.